What if I told you the toughest biological material, stronger than steel, is the teeth of a sea snail? Or even how the US were planning to import hippos to replace cows as a new food source. Everyone was calling it lake cow bacon. And there's plenty more unusual and downright weird facts to come. Time to have your mind blown. Have you ever wondered how astronauts wash their clothes? The answer is they don't. It's not them staying on trend with the latest spacesuit fashion. It's because water and soap aren't all that abundant in space. When their clothes are too smelly to be reworn, they're packed into mini space capsules and sent hurtling back to Earth. When it re enters the atmosphere, it completely burns up. So make sure you keep an eye out. It might not be a shooting star, just Neil Armstrong's dirty socks making their final descent. In Renaissance Italy, large pupils were seen as a sign of beauty, passion, and allure. So much so that women went to extreme lengths to achieve the look. To artificially dilate their pupils, they used belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade, a toxic plant containing the chemical atropine. It works by blocking nerve signals that control the eye muscles. Just one drop of its extract in the eye turns pupils from pinpricks to dinner plates. Belladonna literally translates to pretty woman, but the jury's still out around whether beauty is worth the real possibility of permanent blindness. Every day we're faced with choices, some big, some small. But one of the more tedious ones is simply deciding what to wear. And this is where North Korea might just have the upper hand. In the secretive nation, wearing blue jeans is actually illegal. Yeah, outright banned. Why? Well, because the government sees them as a blatant symbol of Western capitalism, too closely tied to American culture and ideology. But don't worry, if you're a denim fan, you're not completely out of luck. Black jeans are still permitted. The phrase dead as a doornail dates back to medieval carpentry and is far more literal than it sounds. In those times, nails were carefully hand forged and often reused. Except for doornails. They were hammered through thick wooden doors and then bent flat on the inside in a process they decided to call clenching. It made the nail impossible to remove, effectively leaving them not just stuck, but unable to be reused, aka permanently dead. And over time, the phrase evolved into a colourful expression for anything that's completely done and beyond revival. There's a condition that causes people to suddenly sneeze when exposed to bright light. It affects just under a third of the population and is thought to occur when the optic nerve that processes light sits in close proximity to the trigeminal nerve, the trigger for sneezing. And it gets better. Guess what they called it? ACHOO Syndrome. It's short for this. Don't worry, I'll stick with ACHOO. You might be surprised, but the government isn't just all about tariffs and tax. And here's the proof. In 1910, the US Congress came close to passing one of the most bizarre bills in history. They planned to import hippopotamuses from Africa. Aptly named the American Hippo Bill, they wanted to rehome them in the swamps of Louisiana for two main reasons. First, to combat the aggressive spread of water hyacinths, an invasive plant clogging rivers and disrupting ecosystems. And the second, wait for it, to create a brand new source of meat. With a national beef shortage looming, they thought, hey, why don't we eat hippos instead? They got everyone talking about how the next revolutionary meat source was lake cow bacon. Have you ever sat down at a restaurant, scanned through the 20-dish menu, picked that pizza you were craving all day, and then felt a twinge of regret, realizing the pasta may have been the better option? Well, I have, and there's an actual term for it. They call it the paradox of choice. It's a psychological phenomenon that claims having too many options can lead to less satisfaction. People report feeling anxiety and regret, wondering whether the alternative might have been better. Baseball is a dangerous sport, particularly if you're facing off against a 19th century pitching machine. The very first was created by British-born mathematician Charles Hinton. But instead of springs or motors, Hinton went with gunpowder to fire baseballs at batters. And it's no surprise several players were injured, eardrums were ruptured, and the accuracy, not all that precise. It's never good ending up on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. But Victor Manuel Guarina wasn't phased. He was so fond of it, in fact, that he stayed there for 32 years. He holds the record for the longest time ever spent on the list, all because in 1984 he made off with over $7 million in an elaborate heist. And despite a massive international manhunt, he was never captured. The FBI quietly removed him from the list, not because he was found, but because he no longer met the criteria. In other words, they just couldn't find him and gave up. Some people experience a sleep condition called exploding head syndrome, EHS for short. It strikes during the split second between wakefulness and sleep. Imagine nearly drifting off to sleep, only to be woken by gunshots or crashing pots and pans. Well, this is what it's like, except all these sounds are coming from inside the person's own head. It's not painful, but no one knows the exact cause. The leading theory points to a momentary glitch in the brain, a sudden burst of neural activity, or the neurons simply not realizing it's time for sleep. When you think wedding, you think diamond ring. It feels like an age-old romantic tradition, but the truth is, it's anything but. The tradition of diamond engagement rings only became a thing in the late 1930s, in the midst of the Great Depression, when diamond sales were plummeting. In a desperate move to revive the industry, the De Beers Diamond Cartel, a powerful company that controlled nearly the entire global diamond supply, hired an advertising firm to completely reshape public perception. The campaign was so successful, it embedded diamonds into the very idea of love and commitment, and created the fascination around diamond rings we know today. And I'm not sure you know this, but diamonds aren't even rare. Geologically, they're fairly common. In ancient Rome, commoners had a powerful and unconventional method of protest known as the secessions of the plebeians. When they grew tired of all the slavery, exploitation, and political exclusion, they didn't riot, they simply walked out. Entire populations of commoners would evacuate the city en masse, abandoning their jobs, military posts, and even their homes. It was ingenious because without farmers to grow food, workers to keep the city running, or soldiers to defend it, the Roman elite were left helpless. Eventually they caved and made some significant concessions, the most important being the establishment of a new political office, the tribune of the plebs. So what's the strongest biological material ever discovered? It's stronger than spider silk, Kevlar, and even some forms of steel. That would be the teeth of a limpet. Don't worry, I didn't know what a limpet was either. They're those marine snails that look like little living suction caps, clinging tightly to rocks in wave-battered coastal waters. And to give you an idea of just how insanely tough their teeth are, imagine 50 SUVs, each weighing over 2 tons, stacked on a space no bigger than your fingernail. That's the level of pressure limpet teeth can withstand. What does traditional sourdough bread, manchego cheese, and wild Atlantic salmon have in common? Well, they've all earned their spot on the illustrious Ark of Taste. And what is the Ark of Taste? Think Noah's Ark, but swap out the animals for food. It's an ever-growing international catalogue of endangered heritage foods at risk of disappearing, possibly due to environmental factors or simply the loss of traditional knowledge. The Ark doesn't just list rare ingredients, it shares the rich stories behind them. And while it may sound counterintuitive, the best way to save these foods is to eat them, supporting producers and reviving traditions in the process. In Japan, there's a unique dining experience called the Restaurant of Mistaken Orders, where all the servers have dementia. The concept was designed to challenge stigma and highlight the abilities, not just the limitations, of those living with the condition. Studies show that around 37% of the orders end up being mistaken. You might get spaghetti instead of a sandwich or coffee instead of a tea. But that's just part of the experience. It sends an important message that dignity, purpose, and kindness don't just fade with memory. On the roof of the 3-story City Hall building in Lincoln, Illinois, stands a solitary, fully enclosed phone booth. Installed in the 1960s, long before Doppler radar and satellite imaging became a thing, it was used by a group of local volunteers known as Skywarn Spotters. They were the people who'd scan the skies and report back what the weather was like in real time. A bit more primitive than today's forecasts, but probably just as accurate. In the Middle Ages, it wasn't uncommon for books to be written in landscape format with pages wider than they were tall. And it wasn't about aesthetics, the design served a practical purpose. These manuscripts were mainly used by monks and scholars, carefully crafted to rest on lecterns, those angled wooden stands found in monasteries and medieval study halls. The wide orientation allowed the book to lie completely flat, making it easier to read or transcribe texts without needing to constantly handle and potentially damage the pages. No longer is being too busy to visit your parents a valid excuse. In China, you could find yourself on the wrong side of the law. In 2013, the government amended its elderly rights law, legally requiring adult children to care for their aging parents. This means regular visits and phone calls. Courts can issue official orders mandating more frequent contact, and if parents still feel neglected, they have grounds to sue. If you're like me, skydiving is just way too extreme. I'm more a sunbaking on the beach rather than swimming with sharks kind of guy. But you might be surprised to know that this could very well be due to my genes. That's right, the DR4D7R gene variant, often nicknamed the adventure gene, has been linked to a heightened craving for stimulation, risk-taking, and spontaneous enjoyment. It affects dopamine receptors in the brain, specifically how the body processes it. People with the variant crave more intense experiences to feel the same level of satisfaction. A quiet movie on the couch won't cut it. A Danish traveller managed to visit every country in the world. I mean, it's cool, but not that special. Until he realised that he did all this without ever boarding a plane. It took him a pretty respectable 10 years, 2 months, and 17 days, relying on an intricate web of cargo ships, trains, and just about every other mode of transport that wasn't a plane. But it wasn't without drama. There were visa issues, having to traverse war zones, and even that time when COVID hit, and he found himself stuck in Hong Kong on an extended 2-year layover, waiting for the borders to reopen. There's your healthy dose of weird and unusual facts. Let me know if you walk outside and start sneezing. At least now you know the reason. Better yet, don't walk outside. Just sit back and delve deeper into those nuggets of fact-filled gold you've never heard before. And you can't get rid of me that easy. I'll be back next week. But until then, thanks again for supporting the channel. I'll catch you next time.